What's up, guys? Welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Ordell, and a few of you have asked us to cover the Vienna Gambit, one of the most aggressive and hyper-dynamic chess openings ever played. And honestly, I'm not sure what took me so long to get around to this opening. I really think that it's a great option for white, especially for the aggressive attacking player looking to hunt down the enemy king. And on top of that, I think that it's provably better and more sound than the King's Gambit. Let's start off with e4, and against e5, we now play the move knight c3. Usually we're going to go with knight f3, attacking that pawn on e5, but with knight c3, we have the Vienna game, and obviously this knight isn't making a threat against the pawn on e5, and really isn't making any threat at all. We're simply developing our pieces and really trying to fight for the light squares, defending e4 and attacking d5. If you look at the master and grandmaster level, usually here black's going to go with knight f6, and honestly this move makes a ton of sense. First off, black is now one step closer to castling kingside, and black is now attacking our pawn on e4 as well as fighting for d5. In these e4, e5 openings, oftentimes black wants to break open with d5, so knight f6 makes a ton of sense, really assisting that. And here's white. We could play a move like knight f3, attacking that pawn on e5, bishop c4, putting some pressure on that vulnerable f7 pawn. But here we're going to play the crazy, almost King's Gambit type move with f4. What on earth is going on? We just played f4, attacking that e5 pawn, and this is very much like the King's Gambit. I mean, the King's Gambit starts with e4, and then following e5, we play f4. Why do I like white's position more now? Because of our knight on c3 and the black knight on f6. Well, first off, our knight on c3 defends this centralized e4 pawn, and in many King's Gambit variations, we're not able to take the pawn on e5 because this queen can come to h4, attacking our king, and then taking the pawn on e4. First off, we're defending the pawn, and because of the knight on f6, the queen can't even come to h4, attacking our king on e1. And lastly, our knight on c3 attacks this d5 square, which is a key square in the King's Gambit, as well as this one. Right now, black really has three choices. The obvious move is what happens if black takes this pawn on f4. Next, black can just defend the pawn on e5 with a move like d6. And lastly, black can go into the main line with d5. Honestly, if black is not well versed in the opening theory and doesn't play d5 right away, I think black may be in some pretty major trouble. Let's first go over what happens if e takes f4 is played. Now, I actually think that this is a big mistake. Yes, black just won a pawn, but we're not going to be down a pawn very long, and we're about to have a huge edge in development as we play e5. This knight on f6 literally can't go to d5, e4, g4, or h5 because of our knight on c3 and our queen on g4. This knight has to go straight back home to g8, and now we continue with a move like knight f3. I think black's best option is probably a move like d6, but if black plays a move like knight c6, we're simply going to play d4, expanding in the center of the board, defending the pawn on e5, threatening d5, kicking that knight, and also looking to take that pawn on f4. I think black needs to play d5 here, in which we take the pawn with tempo, continue with a move like queen d2. We're probably going to castle queenside here, maybe play a move like bishop e2 or bishop d3, put one of our rooks on f1 and e1, and we have ourselves a very nice game with a ton of development and attacking chances. So I just covered the move knight c6, in which we'll play d4, and then looking to threaten d5. I mean, just rolling over black's position. What happens if black plays d6? Do we have to take this pawn on d6? I would say no. We're still going to play d5, and against d takes e5, we're not going to take back with the knight because of queen h4 check ideas attacking our king, and we're not going to take with the d pawn because queen takes d1 check would be played, and our attacking chances are diminishing. Instead, I like the move queen e2. Now we have a pawn on d4, knight on f3, and queen on e2, all putting pressure on that e5 pawn, and it's about to fall. In fact, black shouldn't even try to defend it. After a move like bishop e7, we're going to take back with the queen, attacking that pawn on g7. Following knight f6, we're going to take that pawn on f4 with our bishop, forming a battery ram on the h2, b8 diagonal. Both our bishop and our queen attacking that c7 pawn, and the only way to save it is by playing c6, in which we can now play bishop d3. And I mean, look at the activity and the advantage in development from white. We have an active queen right in the center of the board. We have two active bishops really putting pressure on the king side of the board, and two knights that can get involved. Not to mention a king that can castle kingside or queenside, get these rooks back here and really put some pressure on black. I personally like castling kingside because it brings our h rook to f1 immediately. We bring this rook over to e1 and we have ourselves a very nice game with a ton of firepower coming towards black. Going back to this position, we covered the move knight g8. I mean, this knight literally can't go to d5, e4, g4, or h5 because they are all attacked by our queen and our knight on c3. I do want to cover real quick this move queen e7. Here I like the move queen e2, defending the pawn on e5. And again, the knight is forced straight back to g8. And even though this queen e7 move temporarily saved the knight from going back, it still needs to go back. And now the queen on e7 is a little bit in the way, and in fact, following a move like knight f3, knight c6, we now have knight d5 ideas, forcing the black queen back to its square on d8. Why? Because we're attacking both the queen, and we're attacking this pawn on c7, which would be a check against the king on e8 and the rook on a8. So we play queen d8, we play d4 as white, and now our dark squared bishop is about to take that pawn on f4. We simply have a much better game with a huge edge in development. So that covers why I think e takes f4 is actually a big mistake. We're going to play e5, and in the case of queen e7, play queen e2, continue by developing our pieces, take that pawn on f4, and we're simply going to have a much better game. What happens if black doesn't take the pawn, but instead defends the pawn on e5 by playing a move like d6? Here I recommend the move knight f3, attacking this pawn on e5 with both our knight and our pawn. And right now, black really has two decisions to make. I mean, first off, black could take this pawn on f4, but again, I don't think this is a good idea. If black wants to keep defending this pawn, I think that the best moves are knight d7 or knight c6. I actually like knight d7 more because knight c6 runs into bishop b5, attacking this knight on c6, pinning it to the king on e8, and therefore putting even more pressure on this e5 pawn. And following a move like bishop d7, playing d3 against e takes f4, taking that pawn off the board. If black plays bishop e7 here, we can simply castle kingside, and after castling kingside, continue to push in the center of the board with d4. Our bishop pair here is much more active than black's, simply defending c6 and f6. We have a very nice center here, protected by both of our knights. We're about to get our queen to d2 or e2, bring our rook to e1, break with e5, and we have ourselves a pretty great middle game position. So that's why I personally don't like knight c6 defending the pawn, because it simply runs in to bishop e5, pinning it to the king on e8. What about the move knight d7? Well, here we can play bishop c4, putting some pressure on that very weak and vulnerable pawn on f7. Black really needs to be careful here not to allow certain knight g5 attacking f7 ideas, because black's position is a little awkward and a little cramped. I think that black's best option is probably bishop e7, simply looking to castle in one more move. And we could play knight g5 and look to take on f7, but we don't want to give two minor pieces up for our rook and pawn. We really have two main decisions here, and it really comes down to what we want to do with our pawn on d2. We have two options, playing d3 and keeping the position relatively quiet, or breaking immediately with d4. Now, I personally really like this d3 move and attacking black's king in Grand Prix attack-like fashion, but let's first cover the main option of d4. By the way, if you prefer d4, that is completely okay. You are in the majority there of people that like to attack the pawn on e5 with both the d and f pawns. Following a move like e takes d4, which is more or less forced, we're now going to take back with the queen, centralizing our queen, followed by a move like bishop e3, followed by castling queenside. Here black is probably going to play a move like b5, attacking on the queen side of the board, while white is looking to eventually play e5, breaking this game open right in the center of the action. So again, d4 is completely fine, attacking that pawn on e5, and in the case of e takes d4, capturing back with our queen. Most people prefer this. I personally like the move d3, and I just want to let you know, I personally don't really think that d3 or d4, that there's much of a difference there. It just depends on your style of play. Here, if a move like c6, we can castle kingside, and after castling kingside, play king h1. Why would we ever waste a move, quote unquote, playing king h1? Well, I actually don't think that this is a waste, because it gets our king out of the a7 g1 diagonal, getting rid of any potential queen b6 check ideas. We're getting our king safe, and now we're going to look to attack the king on g8. Following a move like b5, we play bishop b3, and black may see an opportunity here to attack on the queen side of the board with a5, threatening to play a4, trapping our bishop, but we can now just play a4. And following b4 and knight e2, we've pretty much locked up black's attacking chances on the queen side. We're now going to attack the king on g8 in Grand Prix attack-like fashion. I mean, if a move like queen c7, we play knight g3, looking to throw our knight into f5. Both of our knights here are pretty active, really attacking this fifth rank. We have pawns on e4 and f4 ready, especially this pawn on f4. It can either take the pawn on e5 or play f5, gaining more of a space advantage. We have a bishop on b3, attacking that f7 pawn. A bishop on c1, that once this f pawn gets out of the way is going to be a very nice attacking piece. We can also get our queen here. Our rook is going to be a very nice option on the f-file. And we have ourselves a pretty good attacking chance. I personally love these Grand Prix attack-like positions for white. So that covers the move d6, simply looking to defend that pawn on e5. Against this, we're simply going to develop our pieces with moves like knight f3, bishop c4, and then play d3, a quiet move, eventually looking to mount up an attack on the king side of the board or break through immediately with d4 right in the center of the board. Let's now go over the main line, and I actually recommend that you guys memorize this. This is probably what's played around 95% plus of the time at the Grandmaster level, this d5 move, attacking this pawn on e4. And here we're not going to play passive chess like d3 or try to somehow hold our position together with queen e2. We're going to take this pawn on e5, attacking the knight on f6. And the only move here that keeps black alive is knight takes e4, looking to really threaten this queen h4 check idea. Here we need to play knight f3, defending the pawn on e5, defending that h4 square. And now if a move like bishop e7, which is by far black's best option, we have queen e2, really looking to attack this knight with both our queen and our knight on c3. I think the best option is black taking our knight. But let's first cover what happens if bishop h4 check is played. This looks like a very dangerous move. I mean, if we play king d1, knight f2 check can be played, and white is completely losing that position. But here we can play g3, and I actually think that white is much better. Black may be tempted to take with the bishop and then take with the knight on g3. Why would black ever be tempted to do this? Well, right now, we're only up 1 point in material, and the knight is currently attacking our queen on e2 and our rook on h1. But here, following queen g2 and losing the rook, we're not going to take the knight on h1, but instead play the key move at move 10, queen takes g7. Again, I really think you guys should probably watch this video once or twice if you'd like, and really try to get these lines down. Right now, by playing queen takes g7, we're attacking the rook on h8, and I know some of you are probably wondering, why on earth are we leaving the knight on h1? But if you look, the knight can't really get out. It can't come to g3 because of our queen, and it can't come to f2 because of our king on e1. And more importantly, right now, black's rook is being threatened. So following the move rook f8, I think white's best move is actually b3. Now this may seem like a passive move. At least when I first saw it, I was wondering, why on earth would white ever play this? We're down material. We're trying to checkmate the opponent's king. But white doesn't want to bring this bishop to b2, but a3, attacking the rook on f8 with both our bishop and our queen. Here there's only really a couple ways for black to stop this. If queen e7, defending that square, we simply have knight takes d5 followed by knight f6 check, and we have ourselves a one game. And if knight c6 followed by knight e7, notice black is trying to get in the way here, we can now play knight g5, attacking that h7 pawn. Black really doesn't want to allow this pawn to drop. A move like knight g3 could be played, but after knight takes h7, we're simply going to win that rook on f8. So following bishop f5, defending that pawn, we can now play bishop g2. We're about to win a piece. We have a huge attacking edge, and if a move like knight g3, we can actually just take the pawn on d5. And I mean, look at white's activity. Two strong knights, two absolutely amazing bishops on g2 and a3. The knight on e7 can't even take our knight on d5 because of queen takes f8 with check. And right now our knight on d5 is threatening mate in 1 on top of just taking the knight on e7. This game is absolutely winning for white. I wouldn't be surprised if black resigned in this position. So all that to say, bishop h4 check is not a good idea. because we're simply going to play g3. And in the case of bishop takes g3 and knight takes g3, we're going to play queen g2, not take the knight, and play queen takes g7, aggressively attack the king, and we're going to have ourselves a 1 position. What about the move knight takes c3? This is black's best option, and we're now going to continue by taking with the d-pawn. Usually we want to take towards the center of the board, but right now we're trying to get our pieces involved, and by taking with the d-pawn, our dark squared bishop can come immediately to f4, defending that pawn on e5. Following a move like knight c6, we can now castle queenside, and now after bishop e6, we can continue with h4, really trying to get a grip on that g5 square. Currently looking at knight g5 ideas, attacking that bishop on e6. Black does not want to allow this, so we'll probably play a move like h6, in which case we can now play c4, really attacking that pawn. And right now the d5 pawn is pinned to the queen on d8. So black's best option is pushing that pawn, in which case we can play a quiet move like king b1, really protecting that a2 pawn. And if queen a5 here, we can simply play queen e4, centralizing our queen. A very active piece right now. We have a strong center on the board, and honestly, I would put this position at roughly even. I just showed you black playing absolutely perfect chess against the Vienna game for 13 moves, and we still have a dead even position. I think that the Vienna game is a very aggressive and sound opening, even at the master and grandmaster level. If you'd like to learn more on the theory behind the regular Vienna game, click the video to the left. If you'd like to learn more about the Ponziani opening, click our Ponziani playlist to the right. Leave a comment to let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.